You may remember 2 summers ago, I was on board the boat which broke the record for the fastest crossing of the Atlantic. But we knew that our record wouldn't go unchallenged for very long, and this year there are 2 new contenders hoping to beat it. Although she sports the stars and stripes, this one was built and unveiled this week down in Portsmouth. She's been commissioned by Tom Gentry, who's a property developer in the States and also a world champion offshore powerboater. In the Solent, extensive trials with different fuel loads have been testing whether her performance is up to the challenge.
Charge air temperatures, 014, 015.
This craft shares designer Peter Burkitt with our earlier boat, but at 110 feet, this one is half as long again. It can hold 40 tons of fuel, which means only 1 refueling stop on the crossing as against our 3. Down below, twin turbocharged diesels produce a total of 7,000 horsepower. But this time, the power is delivered to a different form of propulsion. A shaft from the rear of each engine drives not a propeller, but a turbine spinning inside a large duct. It sucks water from under the boat and pumps it at massive pressure through narrowing tubes called hydrojets at the stern, which push the boat along. And the direction of the jets is controlled from the cockpit to give accurate steering. But while the Gentry Eagle undergoes sea trials, the second of this year's Atlantic Challengers is taking shape in an Italian boatyard. In Viareggio, they're used to building big powerboats, but the one in this yard is unlike anything they've ever done before. The Italians have gone one stage further than the Americans and designed a boat to make the entire crossing non-stop without refueling. They believe this will make them eligible for the blue ribbon, still held by the ocean liner United States.
Now, they're having to work day and night to get this boat ready for the launch date in just 3 weeks' time. But doing the crossing non-stop has thrown up a whole host of technical problems, most of which come down to the fact that she's going to have to carry an awful lot of fuel, over 82 tons of it. Now, on the 1986 attempt, the most we ever carried was 13 tons, fully laden. But with this, from the bows right back to about here, the bottom half of the hull is all fuel tanks.
The boat's been constructed out of toughened aluminium to keep the hull light, but strong enough to carry that massive load of fuel she'll be taking on board.
So at the start, there'll be quite literally a diesel lake underneath here. Now, that amount of fuel needs very careful handling. So for a start, there'll be this stuff, honeycomb foam in all of the 6 fuel tanks to make sure that the fuel doesn't slosh around. And then a computer will control the distribution of the fuel, pumping it around to different areas of the boat to make sure that it keeps perfect trim throughout the crossing.
The designers carried out extensive model tests to try and predict the performance of the boat, both when fully laden and at its lightest as the fuel is used up. Even so, they're working on the narrowest of margins and are anxiously awaiting their sea trials early next month.
The Italians have also opted for the hydrojets. And with the boat in this stage of construction, you can see the massive ducts where the water is sucked into a turbine mounted here.
It's reckoned that she'll set out from New York weighing 120 tons and travelling at about 29 knots. But as she crosses the finishing line, she'll be down to only 40 tons and shifting at a hair-raising 60 knots. So how confident is the head of the project, Paolo Vitelli, that his boat will perform as predicted?
We are sure it will perform well. There have been so much studying and so much technical research that we are very confident she will do the job.
So how much do you think you'll beat the record by?
I expect we shall be below 80 hours. The real number of hours is a secret we want to keep confidential.
How would you feel about a race against the Americans?
Well, we feel very much that we are racing against the liner, the SS United States of America. He is the one who is having the blue ribbon at the moment. So we are competing mainly against this liner and secondly against Tom Gentry.
Well, race or not, the designer of Tom Gentry's boat is confident that his craft is heading for the record.
The trials today were superb. That was a full load trial. We had all of the fuel that I designed the boat to take, and we ran far in excess of what I've been hoping for.
Towards the end of June, each team will start getting weather advice. So it could be the weathermen who decide if this year's challenge develops into a race across the Atlantic.
Gentry's Eagle has liftoff, punching out 7,000 horsepower into the Solent. Dollars pay the bills, but this is an international effort with German engines, Swedish propulsion, American drivers and a British designer. He's Peter Burkitt, who designed the Virgin Challengers, and he's taken Richard Branson for a ride on the Eagle.
Well, he was a bit upset with me, but he liked the boat, and he said that he didn't think his record would stand very long.
So business looks good for record-breaking boat designers. And for the builders, Vosper Thornycroft, this monster commissioned by American powerboat racer Tom Gentry. In the driving seat today, his son Norman.
It's like being in a Cadillac. It just floats along. It's absolutely amazing. The power is astonishing. The size, it's extremely nimble. Extremely. It's hard to find words that accurately describe it.
Over the centuries, many successful ships have been built at Portsmouth, and only time will tell whether the Gentry Eagle is a conqueror. Now her sea trials are over, and the tests really begin, as she heads for America and the attempt to beat Branson's record. Only Vosper Thornycroft have nothing to lose this summer. They've cornered the market in Atlantic Challenges. Rob Widow's Coast to Coast, the Solent.
The Gentry Eagle looks impressive, just tied up by the Gosport hardway. But when she gets out into the Solent, she shows the power and handling that her American owners hope will enable her to break Richard Branson's record and take the blue ribbon. The Gentry team expect the Eagle to power them from Ambrose Light to Bishop's Rock, just off the Scilly Isles, in less than 3 days. The Eagle today was travelling at a top speed of 54 knots. She leaves Britain tomorrow. Before her blue-ribboned attempt in June, an extra gas turbine engine will be fitted, making her capable of 70 knots. The man at her controls today was Norman Gentry, the son of the American millionaire powerboater Tom Gentry. Both were inspired by Richard Branson's crossing and now believe they've got the boat to beat him.
It's absolutely fantastic. It's like driving a Cadillac. It's smooth, quiet, very powerful.
Of course, it's an American challenge, but you've used a British designer and a British boat.
Actually, it's a global type of effort. We feel it is a British designer, British boat. We've got German engines, Swedish propulsion units, American propulsion units, and Japanese electronics. So it's sort of a little bit from all over the globe, and really the challenge is to beat the Atlantic.
Of course, Richard Branson sank the first time he tried that. It is dangerous, isn't it?
No doubt about it. There's no doubt about it. But you don't embark on something like this unless you really want to do it.
The Gentry Eagle was built by Vosper Thornycroft at their Porchester yard in Hampshire. It's the first time the company has been involved with this sort of craft for around 20 years.
We've tried out a few new techniques, and it's the first time we've built an all-welded aluminium hull for a little while, but it's gone very smoothly. We are certainly looking to get back into the fast, large yacht market. We have built them before, several years ago now, but of course our main line of business continues to be patrol boats and mine hunters.
The Gentry Eagle should be fully ready by the middle of June. Then the six-man team will have to wait for the right weather conditions before setting off on their record attempt.
Finally, American millionaire Tom Gentry is tonight well into his attempt to beat Richard Branson's record for a transatlantic crossing. His British-built boat has left New York for the run to Bishop Rock off the Isles of Scilly, a journey Gentry hopes will take less than 70 hours.
At 110 feet long, it's said to be the world's largest offshore racer. The Gentry Eagle set off down New York's East River this morning on board Hawaiian millionaire Tom Gentry, who spent $6 million preparing for this moment, when he'll set off in pursuit of Richard Branson's transatlantic record. Just coming up around 11:15 in the morning, New York time. Here comes Tom Gentry's Challenger now, heading out to sea. The official start point is just about 2 miles downriver here, and they're heading straight out to England. And here they come now.
Well,
When it's moving under full power, the Gentry Eagle develops over 11,000 horsepower from 3 engines and sounds a little like a 747. Its top speed is said to be over 80 miles an hour. Gentry's prime goal, as his boat thunders through the whale grounds and possibly icebergs of the North Atlantic, is to beat the record of 80 hours and 31 minutes from Ambrose Light to Bishop Rock, set by Richard Branson in 1986. On the ship-to-ship radio, I asked if he set a target for the crossing.
Well, we'd like to be between less than 70 hours and hopefully closer to 60. Everybody's feeling fine. The boat's running good. The boat feels good. I think, you know, from this point of view, everything's looking A-okay right now. Talk to you later and see you on the other side, maybe.
If all goes well, Gentry and his crew should pass the Bishop Rock Lighthouse off the Scilly Isles around midnight on Wednesday. Ken Rees, ITN, New York.
The Challenge powerboat left New York just over 24 hours ago. With a top speed of 80 miles an hour, her crew were confident of clipping 10 hours off the Atlantic crossing record set by Richard Branson's Virgin Atlantic Challenger 2 years ago. This new attempt on the record takes its name from American millionaire Tom Gentry. He's backing it with more than £3 million of his own money. His boat was built by Hampshire shipbuilders Vosper Thornycroft, and the command centre keeping track of the Gentry Challenge is based at Vosper's Yard in Southampton. They should have been in constant touch with the crew via 2 satellites, but today they've been having communication problems, so it's been difficult to find out what's happening out in the Atlantic. To begin with, the boat was well on target to beat the Branson record of 3 days, 8 hours and 31 minutes. But this afternoon they hit rough weather, which has slowed them down and put the whole record attempt in doubt. Nigel Burwood, Coast to Coast, Southampton.
Well, the challenge to the record is continuing as planned, but now we've heard an Italian boat has left the States as well in a bid to set a new record. Well, Nigel Burwood's been spending the day at the Challenge Command Centre, and we can hear from him now. Nigel.
Well, here at the Command Centre in Southampton tonight, there's still a lot of fingers crossed that Gentry Challenger will make it. And with me is John Walker, who's in charge of operations. John, we've heard a lot about bad weather. What is that doing to the crew and their boat?
Most obviously, it's slowing them down. They're now having to run in 15 to 20-foot seas at approximately 38 knots, as opposed to running in reasonably flat water at 42, 43, or even 48 knots.
So have they still got a chance of breaking the record?
Oh, very much so. I mean, they were still 12 hours ahead of the blue-ribboned run that Richard Branson made 2 years ago, and they've only dropped a couple of hours on that, so they're still 10 hours up.
In the last hour or so, we've heard that the Italian boat Azimut is also crossing the Atlantic, so has this turned into a real race now?
Oh, very much so. I mean, we've been very aware of their presence for about 3 or 4 months. We can outrun them. We came out of New York faster than them, but basically there's a lot of needle between 2 teams of guys in quite quick boats.
But you're confident your lot can do it?
We think so. We have the edge on them, and I think we can outperform them, especially in the rough.
But I think the critical time is midnight tonight, isn't it?
Yes, it is. We have our refuelling operation off the Grand Banks and beyond Newfoundland, and basically speaking, we're going to need all the help we can get to get us through that particular time.
John Walker, thank you very much indeed. Well, certainly a lot of optimism here at the Command Centre in Southampton, and with that, back to the Coast to Coast studio in Southampton.
Continental's Proud Bird left Ambrose Light off New York at 4:26 our time yesterday afternoon. To beat Branson's record, she'll have to reach Bishop's Rock in less than 3 days, 8 hours and 31 minutes. At Proud Bird's control centre at Woolston, team members are in constant touch with the crew, who are led by the boat's American owner, Tom Gentry. Through their satellite and phone links, they've learnt that the boat has been slowed down by fuel problems caused by water infiltration. Extra filters are being flown out to the boat, which is also being buffeted by 20-foot waves.
Is this problem serious enough that they may have to give up?
Oh, any problem is serious enough that they may have to give up. If we can get the filtration equipment out to them, and assuming that they can keep using it properly, then there's no reason at all why they shouldn't continue. The Met forecast is what it has been all the way through, which is more encouraging rather than less encouraging. And we're just working flat out to be sure that they've got every assistance out there on the boat to help them on.
As you said, though, they have had to slow up a little bit. Are they falling behind schedule?
Well, not really, because 12 hours ago, they were 12 hours up on the Branson record, so all that's happened is that they've probably slipped about 2.5 hours. But at this moment, they are still something in the region of 9.5 hours ahead of the Branson record at the same point.
Proudbird, formerly known as the Gentry Eagle, was built at Vosper Thornycroft in Porchester. After successful trials in the Solent, she was fitted with an extra turbine to give her a top speed of 80 miles an hour. A British designer, Peter Burkitt, is also at the Southampton Control Centre. He's an old hand at this, having designed Richard Branson's Virgin Atlantic Challenger, which set the present record 2 years ago. But while the Proudbird battles her way across, it was revealed this afternoon that she has a challenger. An Italian boat, Azimuth, slipped quietly out of New York 3 hours after Proudbird, also hoping to break the record.
Well, we offered the opportunity of a race last autumn. Tom Gentry spoke with the Italians and they turned it down. I would say that it's as near as an unofficial race now. I mean, they've actually left within 3 hours of our time, so it'll be very interesting.
The Proudbird team face an anxious couple of days. A huge map shows the boat's progress, and the next major problem will come tonight, when the team attempts to refuel in mid-Atlantic.
A storm off the Canadian coast scuppered the American millionaire's blue ribbon run. His £4 million speedboat had been tossed around in a heavy Atlantic swell for 3 hours as a crewman dived into the sea to carry out repairs. Further mechanical trouble and worsening weather finally forced Ted Gentry to throw in the towel less than 1,000 miles out. It's a blow that will be felt in Southampton this morning, especially at Vosper's Thornycroft, the firm that built the American Challenger and the control center for the attempt. It now leaves the way clear for the Italian job, an even bigger powerboat from Via Reggio, with an Italian crew and British navigator Dag Pike, who did the same job on the Virgin Challenger. They too are going for Branson's blue ribbon, slipping out of New York unannounced, a few hours behind the Americans.
It was good news in one way. I'm upset for Tom, but it takes a bit of the pressure off us with him out of the way, I must confess. All we've got to do now is finish, and that's never an easy task on the Atlantic, as I know to my cost, over.
Richard Branson will be magnanimous in defeat. He's going to travel to Plymouth to personally hand over his own challenge trophy. Martin Frizzell, TVAM, Southampton.
Continental Proudbird Command Centre, they masked their disappointment with humour. The blue ribbon tin hat, a gift from men from Vosper Thornycroft, the firm that built the boat. But in the radio room, tension remained. Proudbird, after all, still far from land, the weather responsible for its fall. Still struggling on, despite the weather, the Italian boat Azimuth Atlantic Challenger, which also left Manhattan on Sunday. Heavily laden with fuel, they plan a non-stop crossing with a British navigator, Dag Pike, and a fare-paying passenger, necessary to qualify for the Blue Ribbon and Hales Trophy. Reports this afternoon say, though, they have an overheated engine, which they're trying to cool with water from the toilet. The liner Rex was the last Italian boat to hold the Blue Ribbon in 1933. It's now held by America. To regain it, the Italians need to be at Bishop's Rock Lighthouse by the early hours on Thursday. Vernon Mann, ITN, Plymouth.
Challenge may have failed, but the men at Vosper Thornycroft in Porchester near Fareham, who built the boat, are confident they did the job right and believe the record attempt will succeed next time.
Bit of a disappointment in that. It's a shame because a lot of us put an effort in for it, and it's just a shame it didn't go any further.
The boat itself ran quite well. It's only the weather was rough, wasn't it?
You think it's the weather that was to blame?
Yeah.
You don't think it was a boat fault?
No, it's a good boat. It was a good boat.
I think everybody's disappointed. It's fitting, really.
I think they was really let down by the weather. Perhaps the weatherman did it.
Tom Gentry abandoned the attempt just before 4 o'clock this morning, 36 hours after leaving New York and 1,800 miles from his target. That put him almost at the halfway mark, when 20-foot waves, 20-knot winds and fuel problems got the better of his exhausted crew. Back at the control room in Southampton, there was great disappointment.
I think, quite frankly, discretion's the better part of valour, and Tom took a brave decision to cancel this challenge and take the boat, whilst everything was safe and sound and everybody was okay, into St John's in Newfoundland.
Obvious disappointment here then at the failure of the challenge, but there's a real belief that the construction of the boat was in no way to blame. As Tom Gentry himself puts it in this publicity brochure, he wanted the sort of enthusiasm which generates quality. That's why he came to Vosper. The attempt has become as important to the shipyard's workforce as it has to the speedboat crew themselves. And at the yard today, the bad news just kept on coming. No surprises there. Gary Cottrell, Coast to Coast, Porchester.
Well, on the phone now is Tom Gentry. He's actually 2 hours from Newfoundland. He's in the boat and he's doing about 30 knots. Good evening, Mr. Gentry.
Yes, how are you today?
Hello. After the exhilaration of the flying start that you had, you must now be extremely disappointed to be coming back to Newfoundland. But we hear you'll be trying again in a fortnight. Is that right?
Yes, we boarded because of the possibility of a safety angle, and we just wanted to be sure that everything was copacetic. We ran into a few technical problems and some heavy seas and didn't want to take any risks.
It wasn't the engineering and design of the boat that defeated you then?
Oh, the design of the boat is fine, but, you know, there's always little problems here or there. These are new things and sort of on the leading edge, so you can expect a few problems.
Does she need much work before you set off for the next trip?
Well, we don't know. We have to look at the bottom. We lost a piece of the strake, and it went into one of the drive units, and we had some problems with water in the fuel and that sort of thing. Just a question of, you know, protecting yourself against this type of thing. I've been racing for 18 years in the offshore boat, so, you know, it doesn't seem like anything difficult or unusual to me. It's just sorting it out. Over.
Well, good luck on your next trip in 2 weeks' time. We look forward to seeing you in England when you get back.
Well, thank you very much.
There was an air